Hey everyone, after having gone through the JavaScript challenges on FreeCodeCamp, I thought it's a good idea now to go on with the HTML and CSS challenges. It's basically about building websites or small pages with plain HTML and CSS, so no JavaScript involved. So the first challenge from the HTML and CSS series that we encounter is the challenge to build a tribute page. We can see here what is required, or the user stories that they tell us to complete. They show us an example on what to build or something similar that should be built. Like, we should build it similar to this page, at least functionally. And we see basically there's a title, so a heading here, H1, then here a little caption, and then an image with another caption, and then a description of the most relevant events that this person has had. We also see a quote here, but I think some things are not required in the user stories. So we can, the goal here is to make a simple tribute page that fulfills all the requirements, and whenever you want to build on top of that, you can do that, but at least we have the basic structure. So what we can do is we can click here using this CodePen template. CodePen is a website where you can build front-end mockups. So we see here there are some tests, and we need to choose the tribute page so that we can run the tests for the tribute page and not other tests. So we run them and only one is passed, which is that we can use HTML, JavaScript and CSS to complete the project, and we are using those. Now we first need an element with the ID of main that contains all other elements. It doesn't specify whether it should be a div or a main element. A main element is HTML5. I can show you in a moment, but it's basically a more specific, a more semantic way of specifying a div. I should see an element with corresponding ID title, which contains a string that describes the subject of the tribute page. I should see either a figure or div. Element with corresponding ID image div. Within the image div element, I should see an image element with a corresponding ID image. So there are 9 of these stories. They are basically the user stories, and we should fulfill them if we want to pass the challenge. So first of all, we start with the main element. This, like I said, it could be a div, but main is like a more specific way to specify that we have the main content here, and besides main you could also have article or aside, or there are many possibilities. Just if you want to go into more detail with these things, you can just search for HTML5 semantic elements. So the main is going to have an ID of main, right? Then we're going to have a title. You can do it on H1, but you can also do H2, H3, a P with the ID of title. Now I thought I could do a small tribute page for an actor here who's called Marlon Brando. So I'm just gonna do that, Brando. Okay, and then they also want a figure from us, a figure element, and it's gonna have an ID of image div, and then we're gonna have an image with some source that we need to specify, and alt and ID of image. So the source, I've already prepared an image. It's from the movie The Godfather. Maybe you know that movie, you've already watched it, or you've read the book. So the caption, well, the alt element is for accessibility. So let's imagine that there's a blind person visiting our page, and he cannot see the image, so we need some kind of description from a screen reader, and the alt property is what the screen reader would, how the screen reader would describe the image. Now we want to have a caption, and that's something that belongs to the figure, the fig caption element, fig caption. So it's basically figure caption, and it's gonna have an ID of img caption, and I'm gonna take, let's say Marlon Brando as the Godfather. So that would be the figure. Now we want a list, UL, with li. I'm gonna make it very simple. I just want to focus on the functionality and the layout, so forgive me if I do it very, very simple. So the UL needs to have an ID of tribute info. The LIs do not need to have anything. I'm just gonna say actor, born 1924. So he was born 1924 in Omaha and died 2004 in Los Angeles, Omaha. That's a very interesting place. I do know that Warren Buffett was born there and still lives there, but I find it difficult to pronounce. So then we are gonna have a link, an anchor tag with an ID of tribute link. Full biography, for example, and it needs to be target blank so that it opens in a new page, and it's gonna take us to cool. Now we're gonna saving. Okay, it creates a pen on my profile. Okay, so now let's run the tests. We passed 8 out of 10, so we only have 2 more tests to pass. The image element should responsively resize relative to the width of its parent element without exceeding its original size. And the image element should be centered within its parent element. Alright, so right now it looks like this, which is not very beautiful. It looks like a website from the 2000s. So that's where CSS comes in. I'm gonna do a property for the whole body, so everything inside of the body, and I'm gonna change the font family to Arial sans serif. The sans serif, like when you have serif, let's see, well, that's only as a fallback, but when you have serif, it adds those small things, like, yeah, it makes it more elegant in a way, more, yeah, makes it look a bit older. So we're gonna choose Arial, and in case that the browser does not support Arial for some reason, or doesn't have it installed, we're just gonna do sans serif. Then we're gonna put the box sizing as border box, and what this will do is whenever we add margin padding to an element, the browser is automatically gonna calculate it onto the size of the element, so it will not add it on top of the size of the element so that it cannot overflow, but it will be automatically calculated. So let's say we have a box with a width of 500 pixels and we add 10 pixels of margin on each side, right and left, let's say. If we do not have border box as box sizing, so if we have it default, then the size of the element would be 520 pixels instead of 500. But if we have it as border box, it just gets calculated onto the size of the element. So the element gets smaller, but it remains at 500 pixels, including padding and margin. No, actually, sorry. The margin does not count, only the padding and the border. Okay, so now we are going to do the main part. So here we want to center everything, but we do not want it to overflow, so we do not want the image to be bigger than the parent, but the parent should not be bigger than the body, because then we would have a situation where we need to scroll horizontally. And since we do not want that to happen, we just do a width of 100 viewport widths. That basically tells the browser we want to take the entire screen width. So the viewport, it's a very nice trick. Then we want to display, we're gonna do display flex, and it's because with display flex there's more, like, you can move the elements around however you wish, and there's kind of more flexibility as long as it is supported, of course. I think a couple of Internet Explorer versions do not support it, but anyways, we should not, yeah, if we try to be compliant with every single browser, then we can barely use anything, because maybe someone else is also using I don't know, Netscape Navigator still, not sure. So we should have a healthy balance of browser compatibility and modern standards. So that's why using Flex, using Grid still would be a bit brave, but using Flex should be quite alright. Now we put the Flex direction. We see that right now it's a row, everything in a row, but we want it to be in a column, and then yeah, everything gets as a column. Then we justify the content to the center, and yeah, we align the text like that. It gets to the center. Now for the image, we want it to be centered, and also inside of its container we want it to resize responsively. So depending on the device, in small devices it should fill up more, and bigger devices it should fill up less. Yeah, just that it has some nice resolution. So we can do that with, to center the image, it would be margin, and we put the margin on the right and the left as auto, so that it gets resized automatically. So 0 auto. But first of all, we need to have a display of block so that it can have those properties. Margins and paddings if we need some padding, and so on. Yeah, we add some width of 95% here, and that's because we want it to be big enough on smaller screens. But for a big screen, I would say that we make it a bit smaller, so the maximum should be 800 pixels, like that. It never goes above that value. Okay, now alright, so it doesn't do much. The justify content center. I guess we can just remove it for now. Now we put the tribute info, we add some CSS rules here. So tribute info, we're gonna do a max width of 550 pixels, for example. This is for the UL, for the lists. Then we want it to be centered, so we add the auto on the sides, but also maybe some on the top and on the bottom. And we want to left align it. Left align, because centered it doesn't look as good. Yeah, and maybe some more margin between the list elements. So we are gonna take this tribute info lead align. Now it's gonna have, let's say, 5 pixels on the top and bottom, and 0 right and left. Maybe 10. Yeah, maybe 10. Okay, good. So like I said, you can do it more detailed. This is just an example to showcase the layout. I think with that we pass all the tests, but of course it doesn't look as nice. So like I said, we can make some things nicer. So for example, the caption, image caption, here we can do img caption, and let's say a margin top of 10 pixels, so that it looks a bit nicer. Here the image, since it has display block, it can also have a border, so a border radius of 25 pixels to make it a bit more, yeah, I don't know. I like it with some border radius somehow, I don't know why. And for the link here, we could say tribute link, text transform, uppercase, yeah, and maybe color of 555, so it's gonna be a lighter black. So this is how it looks. Like I said, you can always expand on it, but I think this is a simple solution that passes all the tests and it doesn't have so much code. Like you see here, 12 lines of HTML and 38 lines of CSS, so yeah, quite a small solution. So thank you for watching and see you on the next video. Bye bye.